Like one mentioned, this is a very good use case of AI with me speaking in English and it translating on the fly in Spanish. Sorry, I don't speak English, but we have the AI to translate it. So I'll be talking about democratizing AI, why it's important and why it's particularly important for developing countries to democratize AI so that it could help in its development. So let me start by showing this slide. Some of you may have seen this. This is a slide from PwC report where it shows the economic impact of AI in the world by 2030, which is not that far away. And you can see it's big numbers, $3.7 trillion in North America, $7 trillion in China, $500 billion in Latin America, $1.2 trillion in the rest of the world. So a lot of research reports, the government reports, universities, businesses, many institutions are saying there's going to be a very big impact of AI in economy in all the countries around the world. And we can assume that it's going to have a huge impact in Dominican Republic's economy as well. And if you look at some of the ways AI could have an impact in the economy, and by looking at what kind of jobs it could automate, people predict that most of the menial jobs, many of the menial jobs could be automated, right? Like giving out loans or answering calls and whatnot. So there are a lot of jobs that are gonna get potentially automated, making an impact on the economy. And we're already seeing this in many different industries, such as healthcare, security, advertising, finance, communication. And this is one of the charts that shows how the interest in AI and the impact of AI has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger over the last couple of years. And this just goes up to 2017 or so. And you could imagine, especially in the last 3 years, this has pretty much grown exponentially. So the question is, if we see this impact of AI that is going to happen in the future and is happening around the world, particularly how do developing countries capture the value of AI and use it for the development of its own country? And one of the things I think and I believe in is if we democratize AI in underserved communities in developing countries, it would really, really help in the development. And in order to do that, if we want to democratize AI, what are the key things that we need to do? And I believe these are some of the key important things that we need to do to democratize AI for development. So the first one I would say is education. It all starts with education. We need more trained people who can do AI, build AI related products and so forth in developing countries. So it starts with really, really providing high quality personalized education and training. And particularly when we teach students and engineers on how to build AI models and products, particularly the focus around applications of AI, that is focus around what kind of tools to use, how to use those tools to build things, and what kind of data is needed to build things is important. And if we're able to do that, such that we're not just teaching theory, but we're teaching really how to build products, the next thing we need is infrastructure set up by large institutions, corporations, or governments, so that engineers and students can easily innovate, build, and deploy their products. And that will lead into a lot of local problems being solved with local solutions, built locally, built by local engineers. And that as a whole would produce economic development within a developing country. So let me go through some of let me go through in a bit more detail about each of these. So let me first talk about education, right? So why is democratizing AI education important? So this report is a little old. This was an article in New York Times where it said worldwide there's a couple 100,000 really good AI engineers, while the need is in millions. And because of that shortage in the AI talent, there's a huge demand of the engineers, thus driving the huge salaries that AI engineers command. So if we can teach more engineers in developing countries, that talent can not only develop locally, but they can also command high salaries from around the world, helping in economic development. And if we were to look at some of the stats, just in the last 4 years, there's been 12x increase in demand for AI talent. And you can see that it's being used across more and more industries. And universities are trying to catch up. Universities are trying to provide more classes, but there's just so much the universities can do, right? Traditional universities, they can go from 50 students to, let's say, 200 students, but it's still not enough. So we need to figure out more decentralized way of being able to teach AI in masses in the whole country, be it online programs, in conjunction with universities and so forth. And if we are able to do so, then we'll be able to generate a lot of AI talent. And when we are teaching AI, we want to make sure not just teaching theory, like I said, and we need to teach tools that I'm going to get into. If we are able to do so by providing AI fellowship and mentorship and so forth, we will really have a good set of AI engineers in the country. And one thing I would like to emphasize particularly is if we were to just literally narrow down into very few set of courses that a student absolutely needs to learn to be able to build AI products, I would say these are at least 6 courses that a student would need to be able to build very interesting AI products and build AI solutions. They obviously need to enter to computer science for AI and enter to math for AI. Then the 2 core courses that's needed is machine learning and deep learning, and more specialized computer vision and NLP course. So to reiterate, what I'm saying is we need to teach AI to the masses, to as many students as possible. And if we were to narrow it down to just teaching very few courses, then it has to be these 4 plus specialization 6 courses. And that will allow a lot of students to be able to build very innovative AI products. The second thing that we want to emphasize if we want to democratize AI for development is making sure that the students that are being taught the right set of tools and also being taught how to use data and so forth. So traditionally, a lot of universities, a lot of courses, there's a lot of theory that gets taught. There's theoretical components, particularly math foundations, are very important in artificial intelligence as well, because AI is pretty much driven by machine learning, and machine learning is a lot of stats, probability, vector calculus, and so forth. So the foundations are important, but I wanted to emphasize, besides the foundations, the students also need to be exposed to the right set of tools that are very commonly used these days, and right set of fields of study that I just mentioned: machine learning, deep learning, NLP, computer vision, and very common tools that get used like TensorFlow, PyTorch. And when we are teaching the students, making sure that they are having a lot of hands-on experience on how to use these tools to build real products. But just teaching how to build, how to code algorithms is not enough, particularly if we're trying to build machine learning algorithms. Machine learning systems, we also need to make sure they're exposed to data engineering work, and then the students understand that how important it is to be able to process data properly, so that you are able to get the right set of accuracy from the machine learning models. And one thing that gets lost sometimes when you're teaching AI is, the annotation of the data, how to produce the right set of data annotation, data labeling gets lost. So that's also important, and making sure that gets taught is also very important. So if we teach students in AI and produce a lot of AI engineers who are also exposed to tools and data, if we really want the impact of them generating solutions for the local economy and improving the local economy, one missing piece that sits in the middle is the infrastructure. So what kind of infrastructure can we create and generate by the government and other institutions to make sure this happens? And the core things that's, I would say, needed for the AI infrastructure side is the first one is data. The second one is compute power. The third one is the education infrastructure I already mentioned. And then the fourth one is regulations that would foster economic development and so forth. So let me talk about a data infrastructure. So when I say data infrastructure, I'm not just talking about a data infrastructure at a small organization level. How do we have even a government provide guidance to the businesses, foreseeing that there probably will be automation of various different job roles by 2030 or 2040 or so forth, and providing these standardized guidances to the institutions and businesses, saying these are the kinds of data you need to store. These are this is the amount of data you need to store, and this is probably the frequency of data to store. And the more digitized industries are, and the more they store the data for a longer historical amount of time, more easy it is to automate things in that particular businesses or industry. So there should be a push, I would say, almost at the government level on trying to digitize as many industries as possible and store as much data as possible. But doing that is not enough. Storing data is one thing, but making it easily accessible so that it could be used for innovation is another thing. And some of you may have seen that there's a website called data.gov in the United States where all the data sets that the government has access to and is willing to provide publicly for innovation is put on the data.gov so that everybody can easily access and build on top of it. So this piece I see missing in many developing countries where there's no central repository for being able to access data easily, which stifles innovation because students has to go through a lot of red tapes to even find, for example, traffic data of the city or the data that shows electricity outages and so forth. That would allow actually innovators to use that data to predict outages and so forth. So that's the data infrastructure. The other one I would like to mention is the compute infrastructure. Basically, what I've seen in many developing countries is students may not have enough resources or money to access cloud infrastructures like AWS or Microsoft Azure or IBM Bluemix and so forth. It is easily accessible in some countries, but not in many countries. Or even if it is accessible, some of the students may not have enough cash to be able to easily spin up servers in Amazon Web Servers. So what I think is important is local schools, colleges, research centers, setting up at least local experimental cloud. It does not necessarily have to be, AWS like cloud infrastructure, but smaller clouds with GPUs and CPUs, enough of them so that the students do not have to ask for special grants to be able to access AWS infrastructures and so forth. And being able to provide such compute infrastructures makes it easy for students to train large models and be able to build systems to predict various things. The third one in the infrastructure, I would say, is the education infrastructure that I just mentioned, which is, it is very, very important that we teach the students, the engineers, and anybody who wants to learn AI, be able to learn AI. So making these education programs widely accessible is super, super important. And in order to do that, we need to first actually train a lot of AI instructors. So one of the things I see, even when in the education programs that we run as part of Fuse Machines, is there's just not enough AI teachers and AI instructors. So how do we go about doing that, which is generating a lot of AI structures? That needs to be addressed at the state level or at the federal government level, on making sure that there's programs to really create a lot of AI instructors that can teach into schools and colleges and so forth. And one of the things that I foresee is, because AI is getting so important as a part of curriculum in colleges and post-colleges, I see that it is getting more and more important at the earlier grades level, from high school to middle school as well. So when we create this education infrastructure, we need to think about the teachers, the curriculum at the colleges and the lower levels, and the other infrastructures that I just mentioned. And if we do all of that, that is, we are able to teach all of that to a lot of students, AI curriculum at very different levels, create the data infrastructure, and provide the computer infrastructure as well, then it is really a really good cocktail for innovation for a lot of students and engineers. And in those cases, there will be local developments, but to help local solutions to be taken to the market easily, governments should probably address regulations that makes it easy to access the data that's needed for the product, makes it easy to bring the product to the market, and so forth. But at the same time, it also needs to make sure the ethics concerns, bias concerns, and other regulatory concerns are addressed. And these are some of the things that needs to be addressed by the local, state, or federal governments. So if we do all that, teach students and engineers, we provide tools and data, and we provide all the infrastructure, from data infrastructure to computer infrastructure, and regulations that allows the local engineers to be able to produce local solutions. Then I would say local solutions would come up, and it will be useful and be used by the population in the country. And you probably have seen these kind of slides a lot. There's AI could be useful in many different industries, from transportation to healthcare to manufacturing to financial services to agriculture. And some of them, these are more important for some countries and less so for some other countries. For example, agriculture is probably very important for DR. Tourism is very important, and so forth. And if we are able to do the things that I just mentioned before, education tools and infrastructure, you will see a lot of tools being built locally to address some of these things, right? And you've probably already seen some of these examples on how AI is being used for manufacturing. This is the robot called Baxter being used to identify the problematic things in this manufacturing belt. Similarly, for agriculture, you probably heard about drones being used to spray pesticide, drones going over fields of crops, identifying places where that has diseased plants, and then automatically throwing pesticides. So this is particularly quite useful in agriculture. And then you probably have seen these examples of AI helping in doing surgeries and so forth, right? If we were to take a slightly deeper dive on one of the use cases of AI in energy, then these are some examples where AI could be used to actually improve the efficiency of generation of the energy. It could be used in better forecasting, in predicting demand. Supply leaks is a huge problem in DR. It could be used to identify supply leaks and peaks and so forth, and also addressing the inspection of the infrastructure of energy and so forth. So these were just some examples on how AI is already affecting many different industries and how some of that could be applied locally. But the examples that you saw, some of them are probably not yet available locally. And in those cases, particularly, how do these things that we talked about, educating a lot of engineers, providing tools, and creating infrastructure helps in local solutions and development? So if we were to think about that and look at the context in DR itself from local solutions, there could be quite a lot of things that we could do. For example, there's the agriculture is quite important in DR, and being able to, for example, have easy access to the export of sugarcane or other plants, and then being able to automatically predicting demand could be useful. Similarly, electricity distribution leaks seem to be a problem. Identifying the peaks and automatically trying to look at the infrastructure grid and being able to identify distribution leaks using machine learning could be useful. Similarly, improving call centers and producing better call center automation systems could be useful, and so forth. So these are the kind of local solutions that could come up if we are able to teach AI to the masses of the students. And I just wanted to give an example, like a real concrete examples that has happened when we have done something similar in Nepal. Is after we taught a lot of engineers, a lot of students in AI, and also provided them with the tools and the compute and data infrastructure, they went on and started building these cool tools and products that could potentially be useful, right? So, for example, Nepal particularly is very mountainous. And medicine delivery is hard, but some of the engineers got together and built a drone to go up the hills and be able to deliver medicine. A Nepali speech recognition system was not really available, so they built Nepali speech recognition systems. Similarly, object detection in the roads of Nepal, that's very different than the roads in the developed country like the United States, where the roads in Nepal don't really have markers and so forth. The students and the engineers were able to build object detection system for Nepal roads. And similarly, being able to create handwriting digitization systems for Nepali language in the Nepali government forms. These were all local solutions built by local engineers. And they were able to do so because of these things that were addressed by organizations, at least by some of the organizations, on educating in the masses that we were trying to do, providing tools and creating the infrastructures, which spun the local solutions. And I think this has the chance of affecting not just any country similar to Nepal, and it could transform industries like agriculture, medicine, finance, education, governance, even in Dominican Republic, in many ways that I have mentioned before. That was the short talk on how democratizing AI is quite important and how it could help in development of a developing country. Thank you.